my name is Matthew Poe. Be prepared for an intense journey through industrialization and global integrations from 1750 to 1900. This video is divided into 5 sections: revolutions, industrialization, nationalism, imperialism, and finally a special review presentation. Today, I shall present to you the 5th periodization in the history of the world. Enlightenment philosophy sparked revolutions in the Americas, France, and Haiti in the 18th and 19th centuries. The American Revolution began in 1775 under Enlightenment-inspired leaders. The colonists' bitterness toward British policies that imposed heavy taxes without representation in Parliament, or taxation without representation, caused the American Revolution. Beginning in Concord with the shot heard round the world, the American Revolution began. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was introduced, a document based off of the philosophies of John Locke. In 1781, with French assistance, the colonists were victorious. The colonists, unlike the British, were untrained civilians, yet managed to defeat the highly trained and prodigious British army, inspiring other revolutions across the world. In the late 1700s, the society of France was divided into 3 classes, or estates. The first estate was the clergy, the second estate was the nobility, and the third estate was made up of the commoners. The bourgeoisie was part of the third estate and was made up of the artisans, merchants, and professionals. Each estate had representatives which met in the French legislative body, the Estates General. The Estates General had not met for 175 years when King Louis XVI called it in 1789 to raise taxes. However, the bourgeoisie pushed reform. The third estate was then separated from the rest of the Estates General and identified themselves as the National Assembly. After being locked out of the Estates General, members of the third estate signed the Tennis Court Oath, an oath not to disband until a constitution had been written for France, and led a riot storming the Bastille. In 1792, a phase of the revolution called the Reign of Terror began, in which the commoners, with inspiration from the American Revolution's success, abolished the monarchy and executed King Louis XVI using a guillotine. During the Reign of Terror, the Jacobins, under the leadership of Maximilien Robespierre, passed radical legislation and executed their opponents. The primary method of execution during the French Revolution was the guillotine, which was used to kill around 40,000 people in the Reign of Terror alone. In the end, though the commoners won the war, there were not many enduring consequences. When Napoleon Bonaparte came to power in 1799, he established a dictatorship and returned France to authoritarian rule. After declaring himself Emperor of France in 1804, Napoleon waged wars against many of the European powers, until Napoleon's defeat by Russia in 1812. The European alliance then defeated Napoleon in 1814 and 1815. After the decisive defeat of Napoleon in 1815, the Congress of Vienna was held to create a power balance in Europe. As a result of the turmoil caused by the French Revolution, The slaves of the French colony Saint-Domingue began a slave revolt. Toussaint L'Ouverture, who was also a slave, led the revolution. Haitian society was divided into slaves, free people of color, and French colonists. Tensions built between the whites and the free people of color during the French Revolution, and in 1791, slaves took the tension to their advantage and rebelled. In 1804, the slaves succeeded in declaring their independence. However, because the Haitians destroyed most French infrastructure, Haiti became a very poor country. This revolution is quite significant considering it is the only successful slave revolt.
Thank you, mademoiselle.
The shift of manufacturing from the home to the factory is called the Industrial Revolution, and began in the British textile industry in the mid-18th century. The Industrial Revolution was the greatest leap in human history since the Neolithic Revolution. The steam engine, invented by Thomas Newcomen and later improved upon by James Watt, was the invention that led to the mechanization and the transformation of transportation and communication. Methods of transportation that arose from the invention of the steam engine included the railroad and steamboat. Other inventions, including the spinning jenny, water frame, and cotton gin, led to a large increase in textile production and caused the construction of many factories. Many social changes arose as a result of industrialization, including separation of family members, women's loss of domestic manufacturing jobs, and unhealthy living environments. After the industrialization of Britain, other Western nations followed suit. Russia industrialized later than most other countries because of its backward technology and medieval agricultural techniques. After industrializing, Russia built a transcontinental railroads that connected Europe to East Asia. Just like Russia, Japan was technologically backward to the industrialized West during the Tokugawa shogunate. After the arrival of Commodore Matthew Perry, Japan emerged from isolation and opened up trade with the United States, and then later with Great Britain, the Netherlands, and Russia. In 1868, a new Japanese emperor was chosen named Mutsuhito, or Meiji. This marked the end of Japanese feudalism and was termed the Meiji Restoration. The Japanese studied Western culture and eventually modeled their political and social structure on those of the West. These changes were accompanied by rapid industrialization, although Japan was not equipped with the necessary natural resources and relied heavily on the West for these natural resources and technology. Under Muhammad Ali, Egypt began to industrialize in the early 1800s. Muhammad Ali built up the Egyptian military and brought European advisors to build industry. Egyptian peasants were required to produce cotton and wheat for export to industrialized nations, but Muhammad Ali levied high tariffs on imported goods. The British then forced him to discontinue the duties, and Egypt's industries failed to compete with British industries, making Egypt dependent on manufactured goods from Britain. After 1850, many residents of Western countries lived in cities as death rates fell. The availability of more food products allowed an increase in population not only in the West, but throughout the world. As the population grew, however, the environment suffered from pollution and city inhabitants became sick. Immigration from Eurasia to the Americas boomed during this time as a result of the need for labor in the Americas. People came from Western Europe and parts of Asia to work in plantations in the Americas. Many of these people migrated on indenture contract, which allowed them to migrate on the terms that they would perform labor for a specified time period and then be free to work independently. As residents of industrialized cities acquired more leisure time, scientific knowledge as well as artistic and literary expression ensnared the interest of the populace. Romanticism arose during this time and expressed human emotion in literature and art. In 1859, Charles Darwin proposed his theory of natural selection, which explained how species had evolved due to survival of the fittest. Much controversy arose over this theory because it contradicted the biblical account of creation. Darwin's theory led to social Darwinism, which asserted the idea that people are placed in positions of power and wealth based on their fitness to be in such positions. Other scientific accomplishments included Max Planck's discovery of quanta, the small units that light and energy flow in, establishing quantum physics. As financial institutions expanded, services including stock markets and insurance were offered to promote industrial investments. Laissez-faire economics, introduced by Adam Smith, minimized government interference with the economy and allowed corporations to regulate themselves. The globalization of industrialization caused the rise of transnational corporations such as Coca-Cola. Now, a word from our sponsors.
Coca-Cola makes your energy bounce. Wow! Touchdown! Yeah!
Nationalism is the sense of national unity felt by a population. A crucial element of nationalism is common language. Before 1871, language was often not a part of citizenship. Other divisions included religion, which separated people of the same nation. The redrawing of boundaries in Europe was a revolutionary in the means of nationalism. Count Camille Benzo de Cavour saw an opportunity to unite Italy during the rivalry between Austria and France. Cavour succeeded in unifying Italy in 1870, which demonstrates the use of nationalism to build popular support to support a strong central government. The unification of small German-speaking states into one large state in 1871 was spurred by the definition of nationalism as the unification of all people that speak the same language. In Japan, the Tokugawa shogunate was a feudal system in which the land was controlled by local lords or daimyos. When threatened, the system was vulnerable. And because of this weakness, Japan was closed off to the outside, and those who violated this rule were put to death. In 1792, when British and Russian ships were spotted off the coast, the daimyos realized that the system was very weak and started to build their own forces. Japan was then visited by Commodore Matthew Perry, and shortly afterward experienced a Meiji Restoration, unifying all of Japan under one emperor. As nationalism spread throughout the world, the press and public education systems flourished, and dominant groups imposed their culture on minorities. Nationalism was also the force that drove the revolutions in the Americas, France, and Haiti during this time period. During the time period from 1750 to 1900, the plantations in the Americas and the Caribbean were at the heart of the trade with Europe. Sugar and other cash crops were traded by the end of the 19th century. Political and economic reforms came about in the Ottoman Empire that caused the empire to open up more to Western influence. The Tanzimat reforms facilitated trade under Sultan Mahmud II. European competition in the global market also weakened the Egyptian economy, but the Suez Canal later strengthened Egyptian trade. During the Qing dynasty of China, the British began a successful trade of opium with China. Widespread addiction occurred throughout China and caused social and economic issues. Because of this, China attempted to suppress the opium trade. This angered the British, and hostilities began between the two countries. In 1842, despite a Chinese counterattack, the technologically superior British captured Nanjing, putting an end to the fighting. The Treaty of Nanjing required China to cede Hong Kong to the British, give the British more trading ports, and give Britain most favored nation status, giving Britain every right that was granted to other countries, as well as the rights given to them initially. After slavery was abolished across the world, the transatlantic slave trade declined until finally ending in 1867. During the Industrial Revolution, Western nations developed advantages over developing nations because of technological superiority. Social Darwinism also promoted the race for colonies, seeing as it justified European conquest of new areas. Nationalism played an important role in imperialism as well, setting movements of unification and expansion in motion. In the United States, Manifest Destiny led to the expansion of the United States from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Europeans colonized most of Africa and Asia, except for a few notable exceptions, including Japan, Thailand, Iran, and Afghanistan. For no one can conquer Afghanistan unless you are, wait for it, the Mongols. The main areas of colonization were Africa and India, and at the breakup of the Mughal Empire, the British took advantage and gradually took India. After the 7 Years' War, India became an important colony of Britain, a key source of raw materials and a main market for Britain's manufactured goods. British rule over India became called the British Raj. After the Sepoy Rebellion in 1857, British rule intensified. The cause of this rebellion was the issuance of new rifles that required soldiers to use their teeth to open the cartridges. However, they were lubricated with animal fat that repulsed Muslims and Hindus. In 1858, the revolt was put down after hundreds of British men, women, and children were massacred. In 1885, strong nationalist sentiment led to the foundation of the Indian National Congress, which promoted greater roles for Indians in the government. The scramble for Africa, which caused rivalries between European nations in Africa, began with the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, which separated Africa into colonies controlled by Britain, France, Portugal, Spain, Germany, Belgium, and Italy. The two African countries not colonized were Liberia and Ethiopia. Europeans constructed railroads and other public works on the African landscape. Economic imperialism was also used, especially in colonizing the Americas, which was a method of exerting economic control over an area.
Industrialization started with new machines, the concentration of labor. Team factories cause jobs to specialize. The profit will constantly coming. As long as we keep producing, we're gonna industrialize, we're gonna urbanize, we're gonna decimate the environment. We're gonna build railroads, we're gonna kill your health, we're gonna build factories and hire you. Financial instruments expanded, but communication developed rapidly. Industrialized nations colonized, establishing transoceanic empires, and there were large migration movements from Europe to America. We're gonna industrialize, we're gonna urbanize, we're gonna decimate the environment. We're gonna build railroads, we're gonna kill your health, we're gonna build factories and hire you. We're gonna industrialize, we're gonna urbanize, we're gonna decimate the environment. We're gonna build railroads, we're gonna kill your health, we're gonna build factories and hire you. We're industrial, we're industrial. We're industrial, we're industrial. Populations increase because of a large increase of food supply. Victorian ideas arose, but later women fought for equal rights. The abolition of slavery occurred throughout the world. We're gonna industrialize, we're gonna urbanize, we're gonna decimate the environment. We're gonna build railroads, we're gonna kill your health, we're gonna build factories and hire you. Industrialize, we're gonna urbanize, we're gonna decimate the environment. We're gonna build railroads, we're gonna kill your health, we're gonna build factories and hire you. We're gonna industrialize, we're gonna urbanize, we're gonna decimate the environment. We're gonna build railroads, we're gonna kill your health, we're gonna build factories and hire you.